India is now the birthplace of two Nobel laureates in economics. I haven't had the opportunity to meet Amartya Sen just as yet, but I'm honored and privileged to meet Professor ABHIJIT BANERJEE, who is in Delhi to unveil this book, Good Economics for Hard Times. Professor Banerjee, first of all, congratulations for the award.
Thank you. Thank you.
Has it sunk in that you are a Nobel laureate?
I don't know what it's supposed to happen. It's only sunk in that a lot of people want to email me and want responses. I feel like I spend all my time responding to emails, texts, WhatsApp messages. You know, the amount of it's very nice. I feel like there is a sense in which people are extraordinarily generous, but it means I am spending a lot of time answering one or the other.
Who told you that you have won the Nobel Prize?
The Nobel Prize committee. They call you at like an ungodly hour and wake you up and tell you.
So when did you get the call?
4:45 in the morning.
And how did you break it to Professor Esther?
Oh no, she got the call. She got the call. She picked up. It was her phone first, then she passed it to me. So it was. We both got the calls simultaneously.
And how did you break that news to your mother, who is in Kolkata? And I have read some interviews in which she has said it very clearly that perhaps it came to you too soon. You are still in your 50s.
I guess I didn't. Maybe she was taking revenge for my not having broken it to her. My brother broke it to her, I think. My mother has a hearing aid which she prefers not to wear. So when she says she didn't hear from me, she's right. But it's not because I didn't call her.
So you did call her up.
Yeah.
You know, you along with Professor Esther Duflo and Michael Kremer will be sharing this Economics Nobel Prize. You and Esther are married. Two Nobel at the same time in the same family, does it make it very special?
I guess it makes it easier. You don't have to worry about overshadowing the other person. It's sort of straightforward, right? We don't overshadow each other.
But given the kind of headlines that you saw, that it was Professor ABHIJIT BANERJEE and his wife winning the award?
I felt very bad about it till I discovered in France it said, in India it said Professor ABHIJIT BANERJEE and his wife Esther Duflo. In France it said Professor Esther Duflo and her spouse, unspecified.
So that was worse.
Yeah, so I felt it was a level playing ground of nationalistic abuse.
Professor Duflo is the youngest ever, and she's the second woman to win an economics Nobel.
It's great. I mean, I wish there were more women in economics. I think economics is a field that suffers from having too few women.
From presidency to JNU to Harvard, it has been a phenomenal journey. Did you feel at some stage that you are on track to a possible Nobel?
At some point, people, not when I was in any of those institutions, but like maybe in the last 5 years, people would ask me the question sometimes, you know, aren't you going to get a Nobel Prize? And I would say, whatever. Who knows? I don't know what determines who gets a Nobel Prize or not. So I didn't spend. It's not that I spent a long time pondering this question.
What role did Tihar play, those 10 days in Tihar, in winning a Nobel? What thought came to your mind when you were spending those 10 days?
Nothing. I think those were great days. It was like a 10-day vacation with lots of friends. For me, it was a, you know, I used to be an extremely good sleeper. I can sleep anywhere under all conditions. And then you're just hanging out. It's like going to camp. There was nothing. I mean, other than the fact that we couldn't leave, it wasn't particularly painful.
This book, Professor, is coming at a most apt time, it is being said, because of the economic slowdown that we are witnessing. The world economy is slowing down at the same time. What is in store for us?
I think that it's a good time to be aware of the fact that there's a big problem and that we should do something about it. I think the government is increasingly aware of the fact that the economy is slowing and increasingly concerned about it.
Indian government.
The Indian government. I think the numbers will, I think the finance minister said 5%, I think, and maybe even 5% will turn out to be a good outcome if it happens.
Nirmala Sitharaman is also from JNU. What will you tell the finance minister in terms of policy intervention?
Not sure that anybody is asking me, and to be honest, I think I'm first off not a macroeconomist. This is not what I do for a living. But if she asked me, I would say probably get some more money in the hands of the poor. They'll spend it.
You know, because you have specifically talked about put some money in the hands of the poor. Don't you think the current government's grassroots policies, such as Jan Dhan Yojana, 37 crore bank accounts have been opened for unbanked, Ujjwala Yojana, which has 15 crore LPG connections for poor families, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, in which 11 crore rural toilets have been set up, and also the Ayushman Bharat for 10 crore families. Aren't these steps in the right direction and perhaps empowering the poor in terms of money?
So I think that in terms of the long run, I think they probably are good ideas, but they're not actually put a lot. I mean, think of other than Ujjwala, the others are not putting any cash in the hands of anybody. They're just, maybe in the long run, the Ayushman Bharat will save some people from, having to sell their house to pay for the medicine for their mother or something. But in the very short run, they're not highly stimulating policies. They are kind of like, they're long-term policies. Maybe the Jan Dhan will get people to save money over the long term, but it's not about to increase consumption. You don't increase consumption by giving people a bank account.
But Jan Dhan scheme is going to meet the similar objective of poverty alleviation.
Unless people save. Jan Dhan scheme is an opportunity to save. Doesn't do anything else. It's just a matter of, I have a bank account, I can put money into it, but if I don't put money into it, I'm not going to get richer. If I put money into it, I'm going to get richer, but that's something that's going to be, it's not going to make me richer immediately. I'm going to put 100 rupees, 200 rupees. That's what we see in the Jan Dhan accounts. We see small amounts of money. And that's not an accident. Most people don't save a lot and they're putting small amounts. That's not what's going to make them rich. What was going to, I want them to have some spending money at relatively short order, which is very different from the thought behind Jan Dhan.
So direct benefit transfer is something that you have talked about in the past. This is essentially to plug the leakages. This kind of link that is being established between Aadhaar card and the bank account, it's helping in the Manrega, also in the LPG subsidy. The government's own estimate says that these leakages have been reduced as $20 billion.
So I'm with you on this. I'm saying that, or even I would characterize the Jan Dhan and Aadhaar as creating a pipeline which allows the government to connect to individuals and give them money in a way that doesn't get lost. That doesn't mean the money is getting there. It just means that if I send the money, it would get there. But the government is right now, it's only sending 6,000 rupees and not even necessarily all of that to some kisans.
Professor, you have said in this book that economists are like plumbers. We solve problems with a combination of intuition grounded in science, some guesswork aided by experience, and a bunch of pure trial and error. This means economists often get things wrong. Going by that, would you say NYAY was an idea whose time had not come?
Well, I'm not even saying the NYAY as it was designed, was it particularly well designed? It's not, I don't take responsibility for it. Nobody asked me whether that is how it should be designed. And I don't think it was necessarily well designed. So I don't think it's a question of whether time had come or not come. I think it was an idea that was potentially, even if it was politically supported, it may not have been the best design scheme. Maybe afterwards, if the UP had won, they would have had to adjust the scheme because it would be there will be political pressures or economic pressures to change the scheme. My role in all of that was not to design the scheme, but to provide information that you could use to make choices.
Did the Congress fail to communicate effectively, or were they not sincere about the scheme? Because had they been, then it would have been implemented in the states where they are currently in government: Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Punjab.
I think they were sincere in the very real sense that they wanted to actually, stamp a Congress view of policy, and that's what would sustain them in the future. So I think they were willing to embrace it. I just don't think that the money, remember, the central government chooses tax rates. The Finance Commission decides how much money the states have to send. It's not about to be a state which is going to roll out a very generous transfer scheme.
This was a scheme which had not been completely thought out, because there were questions that were asked,
you misunderstand
particularly about the financial viability.
So you misunderstand me. I think the federal government has the choice of choosing the tax rate, and therefore it can actually make something viable by raising taxes. The state governments don't have that option. The only government that can actually afford to run a scheme like NYAY, I'm not saying they should have run it, by the way. I'm just saying if they wanted to, is the federal government. But the federal government is the only one who has the money for it. Think of NREGA. NREGA is funded by the federal government. That's the only government that has money for large welfare schemes.
But is NREGA successful according to you?
Yes. I think NREGA is hugely successful. It has raised incomes of the poor by, one of the reasons why poverty has fallen so much after like 2009-10, especially in very poor states like UP, Bihar, etc., is because of NREGA. I think there's good evidence showing that NREGA increased earnings by 7-10%.
One alternative view is that instead of schemes such as NYAY, don't you think self-help groups, income generating skill development programs, microfinancing schemes such as Mudra Yojana are more effective?
I don't think so. I think there is one of the evidence that we have shown at some pain is that microfinance does nothing for the incomes of the average people. We've shown that we have a bunch of randomized control trials, 7 I think, which were published together. Each of them finds zero effect of microfinance on earnings. Okay, so self-help groups, likewise, very little evidence that they raise incomes by a lot. I just think this is a story that I think the evidence is very much against that claim. So there's lots of randomized control trials on these things. This is what I do for a living. I know these results. None of these things are clear slam dunks. Most of them don't work.
You've often said that India is undertaxed. Yes. But how can taxing the rich result in poverty reduction?
Taxing the rich has very little to do with growth. One of the points we make in the book is that if you look at the evidence, it's quite clear that you can tax the rich more or less. Growth rates are essentially unaffected. The US let me give you the example of the US. US was growing the fastest ever between 1945 and 75. US tax rates under Republican administrations, the highest marginal tax rate was 95%. 95%. Eisenhower, who's a Republican president, had 95% tax rate. US was growing as fast as ever grown in its history in this period. Okay, so I just think there's no evidence that high taxes discourage growth. I think, and on the other hand, if you had more revenues, you could redistribute to the poor, and I don't think there's any evidence that redistribution makes the poor lazy either. On both sides, I just think that this is a bunch of crap that people have seemed to have bought into, but I don't think there is any real evidence for either of these views.
There are several measures that have been taken by the government of India. One of that is corporate tax cuts. IMF has welcomed it, saying that this is the step in the right direction.
That's their problem. I have not welcomed it. I was going to praise the government for having raised taxes just when they decided. I was going to write a piece saying, please don't cut taxes. This is what every country does when growth slows down, they cut taxes. Nothing happens to growth. All that happens is rich get richer. And I was going to write that, but then they already cut taxes, so I didn't bother to write that piece. I was going to write an op-ed saying exactly, don't cut the taxes. I was very happy when the government raised corporate taxes in the current budget. I will be public about it. I thought this was a great positive step, that it really needs to balance the budget. We are eating 9% of GDP through our consolidated deficit. We don't have enough savings.
But at the same time, you say that economy is in a tailspin. Then if these tax cuts are not given, corporates won't come and invest in India.
Corporates won't cut tax cuts do nothing for investment. That's the point I made a little while ago. They do nothing for investment. There's nice studies of the US where different states do tax cuts at different times, and you see what happens to growth. Nothing happens to growth. It does nothing for investment. Tax cuts just put money in the hands of the rich. They keep it. The rich are sitting on 9 lakh crores or something of cash. I don't remember the number. Some very large number in India right now. The corporate sector is not spending it. It's not investing. Why? Because there's no demand. If there's no demand, they're not going to spend it.
I have the statistics which says that India brought out 271 million people out of poverty in the last 10 years and emerged from a country which was on the verge of bankruptcy to a $2.8 trillion economy in less than 30 years. And this is being seen as part of India's economic growth story. One part which is often quoted, which is your statement, is nobody knows why or who and how. Nobody knows why or how growth happens, so let's focus on other things. Which are these other things?
Welfare. I think good schooling, good health care, good environment. These are things we know a little bit how to do. Growth, I don't think we know how to make it. We know how to destroy it by doing, 1970s style policy. We could destroy growth by being heavily over centralized, controlling everything, taking every decision out of the people, having high tariffs. But within the normal economic space, there are countries which have perfectly reasonable policies and which don't grow, and countries which have perfectly reasonable policies and grow, and we don't know why.
One statement that has been made by a union minister recently is that while he congratulated you for your achievement, he also said that you are a left-leaning professor and whose idea, essentially NYAY scheme, was rejected in the elections. Don't you think the biggest endorsement of any government's policies are electoral victories?
Alas, no. I think any government does 100 things, and people have to vote on all of them. It's one vote. So they had to vote. I think mostly they voted for Mr. Modi, who I think is genuinely popular, and they decided no other opposition leader was worth voting for. I'm totally willing to give him that. I don't think that means that every single decision that they took, they voted for. People had to make one choice. They didn't have a choice between, I'm going to vote for Mr. Modi for this scheme but not for that scheme. That's not a choice they were given. If they were given that choice, they might have made different choices on every issue, but they had one choice, Mr. Modi or not. And
so it was a success of his schemes as well?
Or not.
Endorsement on his schemes?
An endorsement of him, the whole package, which might be they didn't like some of the things, they liked some of the other things. I don't think there's any way to tell.
You have interacted with Rahul Gandhi,
yes.
And do you think India needs a stronger opposition and Congress party is failing to emerge as one?
Yes, I think that right now India definitely needs a stronger opposition. I think it will be good for democracy in India, and I think right now I don't feel that people feel that Congress is ready to take that burden. I think they see it doesn't have a precedent right now. It's not. They need whoever is the president. They need to make that person powerful, give him the right to run the party the way they want to run it.
So last question to you. Your parents have been economists. Did inclination towards economics come almost naturally to you?
I guess so.
Thank you so much for your time, and
Thank
thanks
you.
for speaking to us.